Good morning. I'm Warren Gettler, Vice President, Corporate Communications at MicroStrategy. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you from the media gathered here today at the National Press Club, and to those watching the event remotely. And greetings to those in the larger circle of friends of MicroStrategy and its founder and chairman, president, CEO, Michael Saylor. Michael will be speaking to us today about the new economy. It seems fitting after President Obama's speech last night to hear from one of the country's leading technologists about where things might be going in the world of commerce. Today's economy, here in Europe and in Asia, is not only challenged by debt and solvency crises, but by the forces of technological change, including those ushered in by the web, and even more so, by mobile platforms and social networks. Some, like Michael Saylor, would say, adapt to the new rules of the game or perish. Michael Saylor is an MIT graduate completing dual degrees in aeronautics and astronautics, as well as science, technology, and society. Michael lives and breathes software from the minute he wakes up to the minute he sets down his ever-present iPhone and iPad for the night. More than 20 years ago, Michael founded MicroStrategy, a global leader in business intelligence and social intelligence technology. In addition to his corporate stewardship, he's also active in the world of philanthropy and education as trustee of the Saylor Foundation. Early next year, Michael's book, The Fifth Wave, How Mobile Intelligence Will Change Everything, will be published by Perseus. I think it will prove a must-read for CEOs and CMOs around the world. So please welcome Michael Saylor, who will gladly take questions from you after his remarks. Thank you very much.
I want to thank everybody for being here today. I thought I'd focus my comments on the late developments in technology and how they're impacting our society and our economy and our government, and the implications on the consumer as well as decision makers and politicians. I suppose it's best to start with the big picture, although the big picture for me was punctuated this morning by this profound sense of disruption and anxiety I felt when I woke up and I looked around the room. And it's fascinating when you find yourself at a transition point or an inflection point in life, and you look backwards and you see all these things, objects, metaphors, processes that you live with that were so normal, so expected, and so comforting, and then you look forward and you can't imagine any of them being relevant to you ever again. I guess it's that sense you have when you transition from your life as a high school student to your life as a college student. You leave behind everything that you knew in your world, and you move into a new world where everything is different and strange. And that's what I felt this morning, because I got up, I looked around, and I saw a computer, and I thought to myself, since I got an iPad, I've probably sat down at a computer 2% as often. My usage of a computer went from 100 hours to 2 hours. 98% of what it used to do for me became irrelevant, and it's just sitting there gathering dust. And then I looked at a bunch of books, and I thought, in the last year, I haven't really felt a need or desire to buy a single book or carry a book. And I looked at magazines, and I thought, why would I ever take a magazine anywhere? And I looked at a bookshelf, and I thought, well, if I don't have a book, why do I have a bookshelf? And then I looked at the desk that the stuff was sitting on, the computer and the books, and there's a comic book there, and there was a magazine, and there was some paper. I thought, well, if I don't have any of those things, I don't need the desk. I looked at the trash can next to the desk, and I thought, well, if I don't have the desk and I don't have the paper, I don't have the books, I have nothing to throw away, so I don't need the trash can. And I looked at the chair in front of the desk, and I wondered why I would want the chair there. it went on like that as I just began to think about all the things in my life that I grew up with, that I found comforting, that might be representations of my ego or my self-worth or my erudition or affluence. A large library or a large desk or a nice chair or a big computer with a big screen. And I thought, well, if I don't have that to display, then what does my life consist of? And the fact that I felt that this morning when I got up, even today, is shocking, because I'm in the technology business for the last 20 years, so I shouldn't be feeling that, and yet I do. I feel a profound sense of disruption right now in my life. I'm building an apartment, and in the apartment, I'd laid out an area which was going to be a nice library. It'll have a lot of bookshelves and a nice table where I could put the large books on the table and chairs to sit around. And now I look at it and I think, well, what will I put in that library? And then I had another nice desk I'd set up, and I had these nice bookshelves right behind it. And then my architect designed them out. He looked at me and he said, well, you don't really need those anymore. So I just took them out. And so that's going on even in the last 12 months, that I'm finding that just basic architectural decisions don't make any sense anymore. And so if I feel that way, then one must wonder, how should a company feel? And then how should a government feel? How should society feel? And with that preface, I'll step back and talk about the big picture. The big picture is we can now manufacture an iPhone 4 level smartphone device about this form factor, and I think Apple sold 20 million of these last quarter. We can now manufacture that device, and that device will run a piece of software, and it will control a set of electronic sensors, and it'll sit on a network, which means that in effect, everything you hold in your hand that has any mechanical, informational, or functional purpose now collapses as a piece of software into this device. So the handheld video camera is dying, and the handheld camera, just a still camera, is dying, and voice recorders are dying, and tickets are going away. They're collapsing in the phone. Cash is going to collapse in the phone. Coins are collapsing in the phone. My identification will run as a piece of software on the phone. The keys that I use to start my car, get into an apartment, or my VIP pass, or my credit card will all collapse in the phone. And my passport will collapse into the phone, which means it's unclear, like all these things that I have in my life that I carry in my hand, it's unclear I have them anymore. They all just go away, all of them. And as electromechanical devices, as manufactured products become software, they become subject to the physics of cyberspace, not the physics of physical space, and not even the physics of outer space. As these things become software, they also become, due to the mobile network, they become networked software. So what we're seeing is a situation where something that we thought was a disconnected electromechanical product is now collapsing into a piece of software that is networked everywhere in the world. And once that happens, the software networks and then the networks intertwine. And so what we've got is this organic process, call it magical. A bunch of keys come to life, become software, intertwine with each other, communicate to each other, and then they grow into every other software network. And then you've got this incredibly powerful, dangerous, scary, interesting thing, which takes on a life of its own, which changes the way we do business, the way we live our lives, the way we run a country. And I give an example. Keys. On the 14th floor of our building, we have a lot of open space because we were constructing something there. There's a big table. I walked up there a few months ago, and the table was almost as long as this platform. And on the table were 14,000 keys, little keys. We all have keys in our life. How many keys do you have? I have hundreds of keys in my life. They're stacked up neatly. I looked at them and I scratched my head, and it turns out, of course, there are 4 keys for every office, and there are 700 offices, and there are 4 keys for every filing cabinet. And so by the time we get done, there are like 800 stacks of 4 keys. It just goes on and on and on and on. And I just, being the, what would be destructive, malicious, creative thinker that I am, I just imagine like tripping and knocking the table over and having all the keys fly onto the floor and having all 16,000 of them just jumble, right? And then I shook my head and I thought, why do we need these keys? So if I put the right electronic lock on a door and I put the right software on a phone, the phone becomes the key. I just click on something, the phone unlocks the door, at which point all the keys go away. But if I can unlock a door or start a car with a piece of software, then the software sits on a mobile network and the software can talk to a server, at which point you can have a central registry of a billion keys. And if you can, you probably will, because it's going to be a lot more efficient for someone to run that key server for a billion keys than it will be for 1 million or 100,000. And in fact, as you see with people like Google, if you can do it once, you should do it 1 billion times. If you do it 1 billion times, you'll probably do it 10 billion times. If you can do it that many times, you'll probably make it free. And if you make it free, you'll crush everybody that wants to operate at a different scale. And so you see this massive network form in the cloud, and that would be a key server. With Google, it's an information server or a video server or a radio server or a book server. These cloud networks that start to form then take on a life of their own, because now I can start to add software features into the key, and this is where it gets interesting. People normally think about the world in the electromechanical physical terms, because that's the metaphor that we lived our life under for so many years. I read a comic book and I turn the page and I pick up a key and it has weight and I put it in my pocket. But it's important, and this is an important lesson we learn if we read science fiction. It's one of the benefits of having read science fiction if you were from that generation. It's that most of the best science fiction stories are stories written about people living in a different system of physics. So you write a love story, but it's written in outer space at a space station. There's no gravity, right? Then the scene where the man and the woman come together, they're like flying through space, flapping their wings, and that's possible to do, on the moon. And Robert Heinlein writes that book about people flying on the moon because gravity's 1/8 or whatever it is. And then they'll write another interesting story about what it means if you're on a ballistic trajectory. You make a mistake and you have the key to open the door back to the spaceship and you drop it, and in one split second it diverts, and at that point your life is over. You're never going to catch it. So a simple mistake in a physical environment, I drop something on the floor, is a nothing. I just bend over, pick it up, because in a world where there's friction and there's gravity, stuff that you drop doesn't move. But in a world where there's no friction and where the gravity goes up, you drop something, it goes away. You don't catch it. If you needed it, you're dead, right? And so the most interesting, profound science fiction stories are stories about how, an earthling with one system of thinking goes into a new environment, makes a small mistake, and then kills himself, right? And that was the writer's way of telling us, understand the environment you're working within. So in physical space, if you're a baseball player, you throw a baseball that goes 90 feet. And in a hydraulic system, if you jump into a swimming pool and you throw a baseball, it doesn't go 90 feet anymore. There's a lot of viscosity, a lot of friction. It goes 9, 10 feet. I don't know, I never throw a baseball in a swimming pool, but try it sometime, see how far it goes. I have watched people actually, just to show their machismo, walk up to a swimming pool, take out a gun, and fire the bullet in a swimming pool. It will stop. If you fire this way, if you fire straight down, it'll probably kill the swimmer on the floor. But You know, that baseball pitcher, if you put him in outer space, he throws a baseball that goes 90 million miles. It doesn't go 90 feet. There's nothing to stop it, right? It'll just keep going forever. And that's science fiction, but when you get to software, right, what happens if I throw the baseball in cyberspace? Because cyberspace is not outer space. Cyberspace is something different. If I throw a baseball in cyberspace, it doesn't go 90 million miles. I mean, it goes limited to the imagination of the thrower, right? So I can throw a baseball in cyberspace, it becomes a beach ball. It splits into 10 Mercedes-Benzes. It fills itself with chocolate, drives to my front door, and elves jump out and deliver the chocolate, which morphs into gold, right? That's what happens when you're a baseball pitcher in cyberspace. And as you can see, this is the danger, because if you're a conventional thinker, you think, the baseball is going to go 90 million miles. It's not, right? The baseball is going to become a beach ball. Now back to keys, right? If keys become software, then there's no reason to have laws of conservation, right? There's no law of conservation. There's only one physical key, but once the key becomes software, I can give the key to my brother and my sister and my wife and my child. So now the key becomes 5 keys. But also, you know, unless I'm magical, and by the way, magic is a really interesting metaphor. Often we dismiss children and their fantasies and reading fantasy, but it turns out that probably one of the most useful things you could do is read fantasy if you want to be in the software business. Because in the world of fantasy, you know, a necromancer casts a spell and he makes, you know, every key in the world disappear. Or maybe the necromancer casts a spell on you and now you can't get back into your house again. Well, that works in the software world too. So if I can create a software key, I can instantiate it in 1 second, and then when I get in a fight with my friend, I can just make their key eviscerate. I can get rid of it. So what we have is the ability to, I could just let 10 of my friends drive my car, right? I've only got 1 set of car keys, but if the car key is software, I can go ahead and give all 10 of them the rights to start my car. And then when one of them turns out to be drunk in a bar, I can look down at my phone and say, okay, he's X'd off the list. His car keys don't work no more in 1 second. And of course, the reason that's interesting is because if it's possible to create and destroy keys in a split second, that means someone's going to do it if there's any economic value to it. And that means that if you thought you were going to be in the business of providing keys, you better think in terms of providing the most functional software key imaginable. Of course, keys in a corporate environment get interesting, right? Because I want to actually create a key that gets you into your office and gets you out of the office. And as employees come and they go, and as contractors come and go, and as information rights come and go, we need to dynamically change all those key privileges. Hence, something which was a lowbrow business, the manufacture of keys, right, which is probably done for the lowest possible cost of labor and materials somewhere in the world, now just became a very intellectual business where probably some extremely sophisticated software engineer is going to come up with a server which is going to create a much more sophisticated key, is going to give it away 18 billion times, and then pretty soon every car or every apartment or every building on the planet is running through this key server. The good of it is that now I can never lose my car keys. I can never, if it's software on a phone, I can't ever lose anything, right? Even if I lose the phone, I get another phone and all my stuff reloads, right? My cash reloads, my keys reload, my driver's license and my passport, my credit cards and my VIP cards, and all my camera. You can't lose all these things if they all collapse into the same device. So that's the good of it. The bad of it is it is software now, so it's subject to laws of cyberspace. You've got to figure them out. And that's where the network intertwining becomes interesting. If I can create a piece of software that runs on a mobile phone that opens a door, and I can, then the next question is, who do I want to allow to open the door? say presumably like your friends and family. And that takes us to the social network, because if you look at Facebook right now, Facebook is now 750 million plus users, but they must be, if you do simple math, they must be clipping along at 1 million users a day. That is, they're adding that many. So within 12 months, you'll have about 1 billion people in the Facebook network. And that network is an intertwining social graph. Basically, your relationship to all your friends and your family is being defined digitally in that network. So when it comes time for me to say, I want my friends and my family to be able to open my door or start my car, then the easiest way to do it is to just name them or click them on Facebook. I've already identified them digitally. I can just say, let my wife open the door, right? And in a world where the door is opened by software, and a world where I've defined my wife digitally on Facebook, it's literally click, click, 1 second, and I've just cast a spell, which has just made it possible for someone 4,000 miles away to walk through a door, right? And in the world of 1980, that's magic. And in the world of 2020, that's just software. And there's a famous quote by Arthur C. Clarke. We actually put it on the back cover of our IPO prospectus in 1998, and it's never been more true today. He said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So in this particular case, the advanced technology is a social network that defines my friend or my brother, and then a piece of software that will open a door, and then a device in my pocket that runs that software. I put all those together, and I cast a spell, and now my wife can walk through the door 3,000 miles away. Now, what's interesting about that is the next best way to identify my wife would be maybe if I had a unique email. So then I would have to type in her email address. And if I mistype it, right, then maybe she can't get through the door, right? Let's take a more interesting example, because this will it'll illustrate the point better. If I can put cash on this phone, then I can say, send $5,000 to my wife, okay? Well, it's a lot of money. You wouldn't want it to go to the person one over from your wife. If there are 6 billion people on the planet with email address and you mistype by 1 letter and the 5,000 goes to you instead of you, right? That's a big problem. In fact, today you can send money via PayPal. Software runs on this smartphone, and the way you identify someone is you type in their email. And the email is call it 20 characters. And that is 2 orders of magnitude easier than the next best way, because the old way, the 20th century way, was I have my banker do the wire, and I need the bank account routing number, I need the bank codes, and that's about that's a 1-page thing. The way it used to work was my secretary types out a 1-page memo, I sign it, we fax it to a banker, the banker gets it, gives it to a clerk, the clerk types in all the routing codes, and the clerk calls me on the phone, and then I tell the clerk, yes, go ahead and wire the money, and about 8 people touch the transaction, any one of which could mess it up or just steal the money. And then if everything goes well, then the transfer takes place, and it takes about a day. The PayPal innovation was I could sit there and I could type in someone's email address, hit send, and it would take about 60 seconds. And so I guess, again, that's a lot better than a day, and instead of 5 people, it's just 1 person. But even then, I might type the email wrong, and when you talk about a lot of money, that's a mortifying prospect. So where the intertwining network becomes interesting, and in this case, the 2 networks are the social network and the mobile network and the payment network, right? The financial network, the mobile network, the payment network, they all come together on this device. Where it becomes interesting is when I've defined my brother as Stephen Saylor, and I can say, send $50 to Steve, I say Steve, and in the world of 6 billion people, Steve is not unique. Right? In the world of 3,000 friends of mine, there's like 4 Steves. But in my particular case, if I say Steve S, there's 1. And if I just say STE, I'll get a pick list of 4, and I can figure out that one of them is my brother, and I'll go, Steve, click. And that's about 2 seconds. It's about a 2-second transaction, and the probability of error is probably 100x or 1,000x less than typing in the email. It's about 1,000,000 times less than sending a wire transfer. And you know, I'll make an aside point, which is you're not unique in the world. If you go to Google and you Google yourself, you know, you'll probably find, unless you're lucky enough to have a really esoteric name, you'll probably find that there's 50 or 100 or 500 or 5,000 people just like you. Right? It's a very humbling thing. I Google Michael Saylor. I'm not the only Michael Saylor. In fact, there's thousands of Michael Saylors on the planet. It's frightening. If I type Michael J. Saylor, I'm not the only Michael J. Saylor. Right? That's kind of humbling as well. So we really do have a challenge coming up with unique identifiers, which is why the social graph matters. I'm the only Michael J. Saylor in my world. But by the way, how many people use Facebook here? Right? Okay. How about that? Well, do you ever actually come across the conundrum of the conundrum of duality or the doppelganger, where actually you've got a friend, Charles Smith, and then someone else friends you whose name is Charles Smith, and you stare and you're like, can I accept a second Charles Smith as a friend? I've had that, right? Where I've got like high school friends, you know, with a name like Charles Smith, and then somebody else comes along and wants to friend me named Charles Smith, and I stare and I think, it's just kind of scary, right? It's kind of the challenge of names not being unique. I don't want to live in a world where I know 4 Charles Smiths, right? And by the way, Facebook's solution to this, and it is brilliant, is they put a picture next to every single name, and in that particular case, you really can't identify the Charles Smith without the picture, right? So it's actually kind of psychologically comforting every time a message comes in and actually see the picture next to the name. It makes a big difference, but it reminds you of the limitations we have in the old world, and also reminds you of the power of the social graph, because the likelihood that any of 1 billion people have more than one friend named Charles Smith is extremely low, because people just don't like to have 2 Charles Smiths. Like, I will not, out of principle, befriend another Robert Epstein. I want you to know. You're the only Bob Epstein in my life, even if the other one's better looking or richer, more charismatic. Not that that could be possible. You know, that's how people are. You know, there's a certain loyalty in this particular case. But what's that mean with regard to cash? It means if I really want, if I want to make cash into a piece of software and I want to move it around, then if I cross the cash network into the social network, then I can say, send $50 to each member of my family. And by the way, I can say it. I can say send $50. I can take a phone, I can speak in the phone, and I can say, send $50 to each member of my family. Now, backtrack 30 years, like that's magic. Today, I've got my family defined on Facebook. They're linked to a unique email. I don't have to type out the email. There's no way for me to make a mistake. Family is understood. As soon as I say send $50 to each member of my family, blip, 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 a computer can execute the entire instruction. It took 3 seconds. There will be no error rate. If I can say send $50 to everybody in my family, I can say let my family into my house. I can say it, right? So as soon as we intertwine the key network, right, the access network into the social network, I can say let my friend John Checky, right? But John Checky is not unique in the universe, but John Checky is unique in my universe. I can say let my friend John or Johnny C or whatever, let him drive my car. Magic. It's a spell. It's not really a spell, just a piece of software at work. But at the point that you understand that something is about to become software, and At the point that that software becomes networked, and at the point that the network becomes sufficiently powerful, and then when someone comes up with a second network and they open the network, and in this particular case, Facebook is an open network, right? That the genius of Zuckerberg is not just that he created a cool free application to post your photos and tag your friends. The genius is he actually opened up the API so that we can actually intertwine that network with other networks. I can have a computer program go and synchronize on that network in real time, and I could use that synchronized network to create an intelligent money network, or an intelligent travel network, or an intelligent entertainment network. And I think as other software developers, as they study that, they'll realize that the most powerful idea in the world right now is intertwining software networks, right? Interoperable software networks. The social graph drops the impedance to move stuff around in the world by orders and orders of magnitude. It's just, think of it as superconducting, for those of you who want a physical metaphor. When we get to a certain point, things superconduct and you get resonance, and it's not just twice as good, it's not 20 times as good, it's 20 million times as good, right? So the social network creates this impedance drop. Stuff moves, as I illustrated, right? Money could move. Well, messages move, right? I can say, tell John Checky where I live. I can say, invite all my friends to my birthday party, right? I can do that in Facebook. Literally, that instruction, invite my friends to my birthday party. And I can do that in 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Hence, it makes a lot more sense to send out invitations over the Facebook network. But the same principle holds, right, with a lot of other things. For example, if I create an open vendor network, right, say American Express and Visa, they have networks of, and databases full of people that sell things. I think 20 million people take a Visa card, right? Amex must have, million or more merchants. If you create an open merchant network and you can uniquely identify that McDonald's, right, that Starbucks in my building, well, how many people actually know the serial number or the email of the Starbucks where they buy their coffee? Right? Do you have any idea how to send money to Starbucks on the street corner where you bought coffee this morning? Right, probably not. I don't expect you to. But likewise, I don't expect that situation will stay very long. I expect what will happen is when you walk into a Starbucks, you'll friend the Starbucks, just like you'll friend a person. As soon as you friend the Starbucks, you'll have a unique identifier for that Starbucks, at which point you can walk into Starbucks and say, okay, give them $3. Give Starbucks $3. Well, if you can identify a Starbucks or a McDonald's, you can identify a Walmart, you can identify any vendor, including a florist, at which point you can say, tell my florist to send my girlfriend flowers because I effed up, right? In the same way that you can say, invite my brother, to my birthday party. So if you get to the point where you've got that, and we will have that, we will have an interoperating merchant network sometime in the next few years. It's unclear who will dominate that market. I mean, Google might make a play, Facebook might make a play, Amex or Visa could go for it. At this point, you're really just limited by your vision. If you wish to maintain a closed network where no one can interoperate with you, then you'll become increasingly marginalized in the economy. And if you create an open network where people can and they adopt your APIs, your programming interfaces, then you'll become more and more influential. And companies understand software, get it. Hardware companies don't quite get it. But at the point that we got that, if I can create an interoperating merchant network, then I can say, give my 14 friends, free cafe lattes for the month. Again, magic spell. Cast a piece of magic. Can't do it. You can't do it in the physical world 2 years ago. How would you do it? buy gift certificates. The electromechanical way, you go and you buy 50 gift cards and you put them in envelopes and you mail them to people and they take them out and they put them in their pocket and they carry them around and hopefully they don't lose them and they got lost days for a month, sort of. It's very cumbersome and cluttered. But in a world where a gift card is software, right, and the software moves around and then your view is different. At that point, you just cast the spell down the social network and the merchant network, sit back and let the funds flow through your payment network. And it seems kind of goofy, but it's going to happen. It's happening right now. And if you put those things together and you're looking for a moniker or a rubric for them, I would offer the metaphor of the friendly application. Friendly is about to become a technical term. It's been a casual, colloquial term up until now, but when I use the word friendly, what I mean is a piece of software or a software program which is mobile and social and personal, such that it's tapping into the mobile network and the social network in real time. So, for example, what is a friendly credit card? Well, a friendly credit card is a credit card that runs a piece of software. I put it on my phone, and then I can say, go ahead and give a $500 credit line to my brother and a $1,000 credit line to my sister, and I'm taking those 10 kids on a field trip. Go ahead and give them each $20 for lunch. Right? And I just zap the money out. And if the kids don't use the $20 in the next 2 hours, it comes back to me. Right? If money is software, it's sticky. I can send it. I can grab it back. I can condition it. I can say, give my son $1,000 a month to live on while he's in college, but don't let him buy alcohol with it. I mean, can you give someone a credit card that doesn't buy alcohol today? Right now, our credit card is like an electromechanical stupid thing, and it sends you a monthly bill. But when it becomes software, it can become intelligent. It can become a credit card that only works on college campus between 9 in the morning and 8 at night. And it can become a credit card that when the actual transaction goes above $37, pings me and gets me to double authorize or pre-authorize. So I can implement all sorts of control features or discriminating features into the software, and then it's like a magic credit card. Again, think about the witch casting a spell. You will not be able to buy alcohol while you're in college. Well, now we can cast that spell. It's a friendly credit card. Maybe not so friendly if you wanted to go party in college, but it's friendly in the sense that it's intertwined in the social network, because now I can say, okay, go ahead and give a $100 credit line to my friend over there. Fast. 1 second fast. Now, how many people have ever sent a Federal Express package? You ever sent a FedEx? Okay, well, so it's another example, profound ennui and disruption that I experienced because I look at something and I say, I've seen it my entire life, it made sense, and now it just doesn't make any sense anymore. It's like The Walking Dead. It's like Walking Dead. It's like it shouldn't be here, it's here, it won't be here, but yet I stare at it. It's that form on a Federal Express package. It's you fill it out in quadruplicate. It's got 15 fields at the top, 15 fields at the bottom. If you want to send me something, you want to send me $100 in a Federal Express package, or you want to send me anything, an invitation, you need to know my name, and you need to spell it, and then you need to put in my address and my country and my zip code, and then my telephone number and my email, contact information, and then you go down, you got to put all your own stuff in there, blah, 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 and then you have to check off all these boxes, and you have to put in the payment information. And if you like filling this 25 fields just right, you throw it into the FedEx package, and it goes off somewhere. And if I'm not wherever it goes off to, then someone has to sign for it. If someone's not there to sign for it, then it gets held up, pain in the whatever. It's now possible for you to just take a two-dimensional barcode or a quick code, take a stamp about that big, just stamp it on the envelope, take your phone out, scan the stamp, say, send it to my brother, click. And you wouldn't say send it to my brother, you would say send, S-T-E, Saylor, click. 3 seconds. Now, how does the world get different? Well, first of all, it just took 3 seconds for me instead of taking about 10 minutes. But second, I don't have to know anything. I don't have to know where my brother lives. My brother has to know where he lives. I don't have to know because it's networked. I don't have to remember my payment information. And 1 second after I click that button, my brother knows the package is coming. My brother could be in Paris. He could elect to have the package rerouted to where he is. I could send the package collect. And there's a lot of things I can't do. I can't send anthrax to somebody I don't know. I can't send a bomb to somebody I don't know. If you have to know someone, right, how do you actually use mail as an instrument of terror? I can send it collect. I can actually send it to my brother at the family home and let anybody in the family sign for it. I can let everybody in the family know it's coming. I don't need the paper form. I don't need to fill it out in triplicate, and I can know, or quadruplicate. I know where the package is at all times. In fact, that's just a consumer benefit. Look at it from the shipper's point of view, right? I know instantly, every single point on a network where I'm shipping anything, and I understand the characteristics. I can create entirely new sets of offerings that people might value, including I send it collect, and my brother looks and he says, well, my brother never sends me anything important, so I'll wait 2 weeks and we can send it low priority mail. Don't have to make it high priority mail, and I'll pay $3 instead of paying $32 to get it quickly. You can't imagine, right, at the point that you can put a single stamp and scan something in 4 seconds and send it, you can't really imagine anybody ever wanting to fill out 25 fields in quadruplicate anymore, ever. But if that's the case, right, I don't need the form, I don't need the quadruplicate, I don't need the pen. Right, just all these things in my life just disappear. Of course, if you're aggressive enough, you say, well, what was in the package in the first place, right? Because if it's a bunch of paper, we don't need to have sent the package, right? Because it takes me to my next point. Everything I'm describing here, I describe in the context of a smartphone, but in fact, the more revolutionary device is the iPad and the tablet computer, because the tablet computer converted everything we read or view into software. So the magazine is software, the newspaper is software, the book is software, the textbook is software, television is software, games are software. These things used to be manufactured things. There won't be any more checkerboards. I have all these games on my iPad. You play Monopoly on an iPad. There won't be any more manufactured newspapers. We've crossed this inflection point where, and it's always one of those things where some people, they see it and some people don't get it. It's back to my example in outer space. If you need the hammer and you drop the hammer and it's there and your arm reaches this far, but you're diverging like this, you're going to die. And at that point, in that split second, by the way, it might take you 72 hours to die. In the first second, though, a person that understands physics knows you're dead, right? In that first second. And then it's just a long, drawn-out process through which the stupid person figures out they're dead. But the smart person knows in the first second. The same is true with an iPad and books, where it's Apple sold, 40 million iPads. There's 5 billion literate people on the planet. Okay, so, well, they've sold 1% of those literate people. It's pretty obvious that the number's going to all of them. It's pretty evident. We've reached an inflection point where it's now cheaper to learn to read on a tablet computer than it is to learn to read on paper. Okay? How many people have ever read The Economist on an iPad? Have you seen it? The Economist on an iPad? The Economist has a feature where you download the magazine, you click on a button, and it reads itself. And it doesn't read itself in like little machine language. It reads itself in the voice of a beautiful British actress. You kind of want to listen. This is kind of a sexy reading. But you can't help but think, If The Economist reads itself on an iPad, then doesn't that mean that when my eyes go bad at age 55, my only real choice is to read on the iPad? And then the next thought is, if The Economist reads itself on an iPad, that means it pronounces all those long words. And doesn't that mean that if I'm like 12 years old, it'll teach me how to pronounce the word? And then you think, well, wait a minute. If The Economist reads itself on an iPad, doesn't that mean it can read itself to a 4-year-old? And then finally you start thinking, well, if The Economist reads itself on an iPad, doesn't that mean that the tablet computer can teach my kid to read? Now tell me, how many children on the face of the earth, are children of parents with enough money that they can hire a tutor full-time to read to the child 12 hours a day, individually, start and stop when they want, and answer questions? Right? The answer is, in the history of the world, 0.1% of the children ever got that kind of attention. And now with a tablet computer, the tablet will teach you to read. It will teach you to read. Right? It's a very, very, very powerful statement. People don't really dwell on it yet. But once you've seen it, once you've seen something like that, you realize you would be derelict in your duty as a parent to not give your kid one. There are other programs. There's a program called Cut the Rope on an iPad. It teaches you physics and it teaches you mechanical engineering and principles of moment of inertia. And you see all these very interesting machines with moving parts operating in gravitational fields with bubbles that float up, and there's viscosity, and again, there's rotational dynamics. Well, you start by playing the game because the rope's swinging and you're trying to cut the rope and the thing swings back and forth. And the first puzzles are simple, and then they get harder and they get harder and they get harder, and then the thing starts moving and the frame of reference starts changing. And then at some point, adults start to be challenged, but the kids just keep going, right? The kids just go through the 87 levels. Well, I went to MIT and I studied mechanical engineering, and I stared at it and I thought, there are a lot of things that this game teaches you I didn't really figure out until I was a junior in college. And then you start thinking, well, if a 6-year-old starts to figure this stuff out, right? If I can create an electromechanical lab, with alternating physical frames of reference, and I can give it to a 6-year-old and let them learn at their own rate, how much smarter are these kids going to be? Right? How much faster are they going to learn? No one's going to be constrained by the availability of laboratories or tutorial tools or teachers. Right now, the traditional electromechanical conventions, they ration resources. There's one lab, you get half an hour in the lab, and we have like 8 wooden blocks, and you can build things with the 8 wooden blocks. Go at it, learn civil engineering. And we wonder why our kids aren't civil engineering geniuses by the age of 12. Well, you got 8 blocks to build a bridge with. How are you supposed to figure stuff out? You're not going to build the Brooklyn Bridge with what we have in my elementary school. On the other hand, you take these games like Cut the Rope. I can give you all the building blocks you want. I can give you infinite building blocks, infinite assets. You want enough assets to build the Brooklyn Bridge? You can build the Brooklyn Bridge when you're 7 years old. It might fall. It might not fall. There's a kid out there that actually can do that, right? He can do it 20 years before you do it. The lesson of genius, right, is that the genius isn't just twice as good or 5 times as good or 10 times as good. The genius is 1,000,000 times as good as the next person, right? Isaac Newton knew more about calculus and invented more than 99.99% of everybody on Earth knows today, 300 years later, right? He just ripped it out of the ether. But the thing that holds our children back and holds an economy back is the conservation of resources. There's only one key on the table that opens my door. I can't let 1,000,000 people into my house. There's only one key. Take that same phenomenon when it becomes software. This is something you see in the gaming world. It's something I struggled with for a while. Why is Zynga so successful? Why do people want to play these games like Farmville and Cityville and Mafia Wars? And they're very successful. Cityville is a game that Zynga created that spread down the social network virally, and it went to nearly 100 million people in 90 days. Right? Never in the history of the world we ever move a game to 100 million people in 3 months, but they did it. And that was because it's software, it's non-conservative, it went down the social graph, so it went virally very rapidly. But the question is, why do people want to play that game? And I thought about it for a while, and then at some point the answer became pretty clear, which is, in the physical world, there's a conservation of resources. There's only one mayor in DC. There's only one president. There's only one guy in charge of the Air Force. You know, if you're lucky enough to have a yacht, you can float it around. Not everybody can have a yacht. If you're lucky enough to have a plane, that's great. You spend your time designing your plane, you fly it from here to there. There aren't enough planes to go around. There's not enough of anything to go around in the physical world. Therefore, we don't let kids sit around thinking about how to be city planners of San Francisco. You can't have your own city. But in the gaming world, in the virtual world, you can have your own city. You can have your own city. You can be the mayor, and you can make these decisions. You can decide where you want the highways to go. In DC, we've got the dullest toll road thing. We've got one big project. There's one project. There's one project that's interesting. That means someone gets to make a decision. But in the virtual world, 20 million people can have their own city, 20 million projects. They can all make a decision. And to the extent that that's ego gratifying, right? In the world of mafia wars, you can have 37 assassins working for you. You get infinite machine guns. You can kill as many people as you want. Of course it's fun. I don't know if it's fun to be a real mafia don, but the point is it's engaging. I mean, nobody says, I'm bored with my life. And it's probably educational. And the same is true with all these other things we do in the real world. There's a limited number of spots for CEOs, and there's a limited number of spots for mayors and people with wealth and power and assets that can say, I want 500 people to go in that direction, or I want to launch a war in that direction. It's limited. But in the virtual world, it's unlimited. So coming back to the issue of education, if you can actually create a virtual lab, I can give you as much material as you want. You can construct your own building and watch it collapse. I can give you as many people. I can give you as much energy as you want. You know what happens if I triple the amount of voltage to that chainsaw? Okay, well, it's kind of hard to run that experiment in the real world. In the virtual world, it's not so hard, right? You want to learn electromechanics? You'll learn it pretty quickly when I just give you all those tools. As that stuff becomes software, we break the conservation rule. There's no conservation of energy, no conservation of mass. And it's the same thing, right? With my virtual key, I can now let 1 million people into my apartment, right? Or at least give 1 million keys out or take them back. I can conceive of anything, and I can blast it, right? That baseball player in cyberspace throws a baseball, becomes 1 million baseballs. It becomes 1 billion baseballs. It becomes a planet of baseballs, right? There's no conservation. You're only limited by your imagination and your thoughtfulness. And so once you appreciate that, and you appreciate the fact that all this stuff is becoming software, then you realize that software manifesting itself on a tablet computer has the power to completely change the way we learn, the rate at which we learn, the economics of learning, the economics of every business. If I give a tablet computer to a kid, I can give them a laboratory where they can construct their own bridges and buildings and where they can burn down their own city and see how it burns. I can also give them every book written before the year 1940 for free. Right? Because copyrights expire after whatever 70 years. There are millions and millions and millions of books. You'll be able to pull them up for nothing for the cost of the bits. So an iPad is an infinite library, and that again brings me back to the disruption of this morning, which is how can I have any status as a man who owns 10,000 books when a child can own 10 million books? What does that mean anymore? It doesn't. Vanderbilt had a library at his house in Biltmore. If you've walked through it, it's a spectacular library. He was one of the 100 richest men in the world at the time. and is now meaningless as a gesture of wealth. It's a beautiful piece of architecture, but what you see is things like this. Books are now antiques, and to the extent, just as pianos are furniture and not the principal source of music. 100 years ago, a piano was the principal source of music in a living room. Today, a piano is just a piece of furniture. If it doesn't have architectural value or antique value, it doesn't have value. Same is true with a book. A paperback book, a comic book, they don't have any value unless it's architectural. So perhaps a large leather-bound first edition book that looks beautiful has some value as a piece of furniture to stare at or as a decorative finish. But it's just 99% of what we have and produce and manufacture and shift and store no longer has any intrinsic value. That 40 million iPads is going to become 350 million tablet computers within the next 36 months to 60 months. And it'll be 1 billion sometime out 10 years from now. And 20 years from now, it'll probably be 5 billion. Now, why do I think 5 billion? Because there's 5 billion mobile phones on the planet. And when I was in college, there were 0. I'm not that old. 20 years, 0 to 5 billion. There are more people can access mobile networks in the world that can get access to running water. All right, so network access is greater. And as that happens, right, you've got this profound, disruptive, egalitarian, utilitarian tornado that's blowing through everything. If I can actually provide 12 million books for free to someone with an iPad, then that means I can provide 12 million books to someone for free in the middle of a jungle of Burma. Right? I can move that asset to the Serengeti. If I can provide you with a service, I mean, I can provide you interactive video consultation as a doctor. I can provide it to you from anywhere to anywhere. Right? So what you see is that you see in the first world marks or derives its productivity from the concentration of assets in our major cities. You've got access to doctors, to libraries, to roads, to bank branches, to insurance brokers. But if I can buy the insurance from a mobile device, and if I don't need an ATM, right? How do you spend money if there's no ATM and you got no cash in your pocket, right? You starve. But the joke is, you don't need an ATM if there is no cash, and if the cash goes to a phone, then the ATM, the strip mall, the money all become meaningless, and that means that somebody can stand 500 miles away from the nearest strip mall or the nearest bank branch or the nearest insurance broker and still avail themselves of the same privileges. In fact, it used to be a pain in the ass to travel to Europe because you can't get the newspaper. And then the rich people used to get these massively expensive fax machines, and they would actually print out their own copy of the Wall Street Journal on their yacht. It was like a sign of affluence. The billionaires got the Wall Street Journal printed on his yacht. Of course, the joke today is that, college girl with an iPad can have the Wall Street Journal popping up into her hand for just about nothing. A college girl, middle-class person with an iPad's got better information than a billionaire had 5 years ago. How's that for disruption? I could sit in the middle of a shack, right? In the middle of Africa. I can pull the Wall Street Journal every morning. I can access all the trading networks and all the communication networks, and I can be just as effective a stockbroker or trader or hedge fund guy as anybody else. So what keeps them from being in that business? Because right now that business is New York City. It's New York City because people in New York got a good education and they talk to each other. But what if I can get a good education on an iPad, right? If I can automate education or project it, then maybe people that don't live in the first world can get just as educated as people that do. By the way, the other reason they don't get educated is it costs $250,000 to go to Harvard, and they don't have $250,000. But if you break down what the real cost is, right, the $250,000 going to Harvard is for the bricks and the mortar and the teacher and the textbooks. And what if that stuff just doesn't matter? Right? There's an example of a Stanford AI class. They're going to teach the class via a computer, and they're going to have 100,000 people enroll on it for the class. 100,000 people, one class. Alan Turing proposed the Turing test. He said the way you know that you've got artificial intelligence is if you put the computer behind the screen, you put a person behind the screen, and you start asking questions, you can't tell who's who. You can't tell the difference. If I can't tell that you're not intelligent, then maybe you are intelligent. Okay, and Google brings that to life in the following way. If I have a question, or let's say if you have a question and you had a choice, ask Google or ask me, who would you ask? You know, you can ask the wrong question to Google and it will give you the right answer. Right? They're that smart, right? You'll say, well, how do you spell, you know, or what's the score in the Seattle Capitals hockey game? And they'll say, did you mean the Washington Capitals hockey game? You know, because of course they can figure that out statistically. If you have enough information, enough computer power, the computer starts to get intelligent. And so when it comes to education, once you've uploaded someone's lectures and you've uploaded answers to questions, and you've got enough of that stuff, if you index it enough, you can engage in a conversation which is almost impossible to discern from the conversation you have with a real person. And I would go further and say that it won't be very long before the conversation with the computer is more interesting and more informative than the conversation with the person. And you don't believe me, right? Just ask any simple question to Google and then ask it to any of your friends, and you'll see that Google knows better than any of your friends know what the answer is. And as these data types get more articulate, as we start to put more video and more structured content online, then that will be even more so the case. As that happens, right, then we're back to the question of what kind of assets do we really need in the world to get educated, right? Do we need a desk to put books on, and do we need to have paper, and do we need to have printers, and do we need to have computers, and do we need to have people walking around, and trash cans, and janitors, and dormitories? I mean, all these things, do we really need all this stuff? That cut the rope game, you download that game, and I'll tell you that cut the rope game actually is more educational than just about any laboratory I saw, and I went to the most expensive engineering school on earth. And that cut the rope game is actually more didactic, right? And so that's, it's humbling. But again, it's back to like why I woke up this morning and I had that sense of frustration, or not frustration, but anxiety, which is everything everything in my world looking back, you know, looks to me to be rusting, obsolescent, becoming more and more irrelevant. The laboratories and the bricks in the school and the big columns and the desks and the lecture halls and the libraries, all the stuff that is the crutch that makes me feel that I was educated or I have assets or I have wealth or self-worth. All that's becoming irrelevant because the assets are being liquefied into software. The software is running across all these mobile devices, and then the power, the electricity is coming out of the cloud. And I think I'll probably end with that point before I take questions. And the point with the cloud is if I can put online a database that answers your questions and I can serve it up to 1 million people, I might as well serve it up to 1 billion people. And if you look at the significance of the cloud, well, the cloud has basically allowed computational server power and information to leap outside of the proprietary domain of the institution, and it has thrown it into the public domain where it's available to everyone. And let's take examples like New Yorkers are advantaged, but because they have access to the New York Library, it's a proprietary edge. They can go to the library and get a book. But when Google digitizes all the books, New Yorkers don't have a library advantage anymore. In fact, at that point, the poor kid in Burma can get the book faster and easier on the iPad than the New Yorker can. So the balance shifted, and the institutional advantage of storing all the information in the library becomes irrelevant. Likewise, if I control the Fox television network, then I have some advantage. I've got assets, right? Look at all the assets around here in the National Press Club. It's kind of hard for a 16-year-old to start their own television show when all the television broadcasting power is controlled by some institution. But YouTube is a television network in the cloud, but the profound thing about it is it's not a television network in the cloud for big institutions, it's for anybody. So 16-year-old girl walks through town square in Egypt and she sees something she don't like soldiers beating somebody. She takes the video like that, she hits upload and share, it goes on the social network, gets retweeted 5 times to 24 million people. The video gets uploaded to YouTube or some cloud network, and initially you need one server, then you have 27,000 people watching the video, then you have 270,000 people watching the video, then you have 14 million people watching the video. In 48 hours, there's 197,000 servers that are serving up that 16-year-old girl's program. Now, 10 years ago, what's the likelihood that a 16-year-old girl manages to put her own program on national network television within 48 hours at her whim? Wouldn't happen, impossible to happen, because the old world is institutionalized, calcified. It's all about, I go to Harvard, Harvard has $1 billion in assets, and therefore I have an advantage over everybody else. I live in New York, I have an advantage. I live in America, I have the Library of Congress, I have a Navy, I have an advantage over everybody else. Now you don't have an advantage, A student leader leading the protest against Chavez's government managed to get 250,000 Twitter followers. Everything she says, 250,000 people pay attention to. She got it through the cloud. So the cloud is a disruptive force because it reallocates, you want to boil it down to something physical, it might very well reallocate $25 million worth of capital to a 16-year-old girl in 24 hours at the whim of no politician. Without Rupert Murdoch's involvement, no one can control it, right? It becomes viral, and the thing that determines whether you get that allocation is in essence the rapid viral voting of people through the social network, and that's a force to create brands. It created the Justin Biebers of the world. It's a force to rip them down. It destroyed Galliano. It'll rip down a government, Tunisia or Egypt. It'll destabilize Syria. So it's destructive, but it's also a constructive force. It just is a force of nature we have to take into account. So, in summary, if I had to leave you with a thought, the thought is, looking back, we grew up in a world controlled by the laws of physics with gravity and friction, viscosity, and conservation of material, and the sound barrier and the light barrier. All these constraints, and they make our world kind of safe and easy, and I drop stuff, and it does sort of something I expected it to do. I can figure it out. The new world, there's no gravity in cyberspace, there's no viscosity, there's no conservation of anything. I can blink and I can give every child in the world infinite teachers, personal teachers, infinite books, infinite laboratories in the blink of an eye if I want to. So anything I can conceptualize, anything I can imagine, anything I could magically cast a spell on in a fantasy novel, I can create in software within reason. And as that dynamic plays itself out in the world of media, in the world of finance, in the world of insurance, in the world of banking, in the world of travel, right? Then you're going to see an evolution where you've got the winners, and they're the people that understand software, and they live in cyberspace, and they think that way. You're going to have the losers, like the blockbusters. You're going to have people that can't conceive of it, and they ship physical material goods, and they can't understand software or software networks, and they'll keep attempting to sell a DVD or a CD or a manufactured book or a manufactured newspaper. Or, right, even more frustrating, right, they'll attempt to entrain those economies, right? We have to make sure that we don't lose jobs, right? That's a mantra. We don't want to lose jobs, but in fact, we do want to lose jobs, right? If the job is you pull a plow with your shoulders, and we have 82 million people in this country that pull plows with their shoulders, when I invent a combine or a tractor and I eliminate 80 million of those jobs, it wasn't a move backwards, it's a move forward. So software that eliminates jobs that are back-breaking and redundant and repetitive is probably a force for good, not a force for evil. And for the most part, all these software forces we're unleashing in the society, they are eliminating a certain amount of work and labor and inefficiency of processes, right? There's a job for someone to like read the Federal Express package and sort it, right? And there's a job for someone to like write in all those address fields. But sometimes those jobs are just created out of inefficiency. So the winners will appreciate that. They'll unleash software that becomes very efficient. And then you're going to have everybody in the middle who's going to be accommodating this, and they'll be running as hard as they can to stay up with the curve. And I would like to say it's as simple as, well, there's the speech, go do it. But as I said before, I've been living with this for a long time now, and even this morning I woke up with anxiety, because even all the metaphors and all the things around me just seem to be fading away. So I don't really think you can take it for granted. And in fact, the great irony, right, is probably the company I believe that has got the most smartest, aggressive people in the entire industry that understands this better than anybody is Google. Those guys produce more stuff, right? They've revolutionized the mapping business. They're scanning millions of books. They actually bought trucks and they drove them down every single street in America and Australia and Europe to create Street View, so that you can virtually walk down a street. And when they did that, they combined it with maps, and they obsolesced every traditional map. You would never, ever use a traditional map when you could use a map on an iPad. So these guys get it. They're spending huge amounts of money. But yet the smartest, richest, most aggressive company in this industry last year felt insecure enough to fire their CEO because they didn't think they were moving fast enough. And that's their message to us. I can't help but think that we all ought to be feeling the same thing right now, which is, don't rest on your laurels. You ought to feel a bit insecure. You ought to be thinking really hard about this disruptive force in every part of the economy you're engaged in. And I just don't think you can invest enough or go hard enough or take this seriously enough to underestimate it. It's something that really needs to be given an incredible amount of attention. And having said all that, the optimistic part of this entire transition is it's undoubtable that by the time we come out of this transition, we will all have more of everything we want. Right? The world's going to be a richer, more prosperous place, and everybody's quality of life is about to get much better because everything is just much better in software. That's the reason it spreads. You'll have more of everything in your life that you want, and the quality of living of the entire civilization ought to increase, and there ought to be a plethora of opportunities for everyone. And so with that, I'd be happy to take questions from the audience.
What advice would you give CEOs these days?
What advice would you give CEOs these days in terms of getting with the program when it comes to knowing their markets, knowing their supply chains through business intelligence, through software?
I think the best advice I could give is there are certain technologies that are bellwethers that you can't afford to ignore. You need to understand them, even if you're understanding them so that you can't ignore them. You can't not understand the smartphone, the iPhone, iTunes. You need to understand that. You need to understand the iPad. I know a lot of people, they say, oh, I'll wait until the next one. Right? If you're anybody with money and power, right? If you have anything at all to lose, you can't afford to wait till the next one. You ought to get it just to figure out how someone else is going to wreck your company. Right? If I was running any business at all and I didn't have the most advanced tablet computer, the most advanced smartphone, and I didn't understand these cloud networks, I would go embrace them and study them just to figure out how my competitor is about to wreck me. Because you can pop up Netflix on an iPad and watch television. There's some guy running a television network right now ought to be thinking about whether or not his television network is about to become irrelevant. So understand that. Understand technologies like Google Maps, like YouTube. I'd be studying every move that Amazon makes, that Apple makes, that Google makes, that Facebook makes. A lot of CEOs aren't on Facebook. It became, for a while, it's been one of those things where, well, that's for kids. I'm too important, or I'm too rich, or I'm too powerful, or I have too much to lose, or I have to protect my privacy. And I think that's a mistake, right? I mean, the CEOs almost need to use it because if they don't use it, they don't understand how their entire consumer marketing division is going to become invalidated. Right, and there are things going on in the world of social networks or mobile networks that are obsolescing, invalidating, or rendering irrelevant entire segments of the economy, entire segments of corporations. So I would be a technophile. I think to say I'm not going to play with technology, it's faddish and trendy. I mean, there used to be CEOs who they would brag about, I don't use email. I don't do that. I don't do that. That's demeaning. That's beneath me. I'm too important to do that. I think that's a foolish idea for the metaphorical reason that if you lived in the world without magic and then some guy walked in and said, "Watch this," and threw a thunderbolt out of his finger and blew up a city, you would ignore that at your own peril. Right? So I say, this is magic. You ignore it at your own peril. You got to figure out whether or not it's going to screw up your business or not. And I don't think anybody with any responsibility for either government or for business can afford to ignore these technologies at this point. They need to understand them. Yes, sir.
You premised this on the physics of cyberspace. What does that mean?
That's a reasonable phrase, I suppose. Yeah, the physics of cyberspace.
What are the dimensions of it?
Well, it probably would be naive to say there are no constraints in cyberspace, because is cyberspace magic space, right? I mean, maybe that's the next question. In magic space, in fantasy land, right, which, fantasy land used to be like a term of derision, right? But the joke, of course, is I don't really think it's a term of derision if you're in the business of software. You really should be living in fantasy land, right? If you can imagine it, then maybe you can create it. But cyberspace is one step constrained from fantasy land. In fantasy land, I can throw a thunderbolt and blow up an entire city. But in cyberspace, if I throw a thunderbolt, I need to have enough server power to blow up the entire city. So the physics are going to be based upon network bandwidth. Right? I can have my own television network, but only to the extent that I have the bandwidth to deliver a streaming HD video signal. Right? So network bandwidth, cost, right? Cost of bandwidth. You can have your own, again, you can have your own television show, and you can watch television on an iPad in a bar, but if Verizon then changes the billing method on your 3 or 4G network to charge you, $1 a gigabyte, right? Then watching television is going to cost you $300 an hour, right? So the cost of bandwidth, the amount of bandwidth are two of the constraints in cyberspace, and the amount of server capacity on the back end. I can conceivably create a television network of my own that serves up to 10 million people, but I've got to have the back end that'll scale to 10 million. So whose cloud am I using? And then what are they charging for that, or is that free? So understanding the back end power of the server, understanding the bandwidth to the clients, understanding the form factors of the clients, right? This is as big as it is. The iPad is as big as it is. Understanding those things is important. Understanding the telemetry devices, the sensors, is there a GPS, is there a radio compass, is there a speaker, is there a microphone in the device, and as those things proliferate, understanding near-field communications and how devices integrate with that is important. So I think understanding the physical device world, the networks the devices run on, the economics of the networks, and then the back-end cloud sources of power or cloud sources of data. For example, YouTube is a source of infinite or near infinite power for video broadcasting for most people that want to distribute video. On the other hand, Facebook is a source of incredible data power. If I have 50 million customers and I create a Starbucks card running on a smartphone, and then I integrate my Starbucks VIP card with the Facebook network, then I could actually draw from the entire Facebook data cloud, and I would have encyclopedic knowledge of the demographic, psychographic profile of all 50 million people in real time. So understanding the sources of information and the sources of bandwidth on the network, and then what you can tap and what it's going to cost you. In some cases, it's free. YouTube doesn't charge you anything to show your video 19 million times. In some cases, it costs money. Verizon's going to charge you $19 million. If it's on a Wi-Fi network, it'll be free, unless Comcast gets to change that. It's not free anymore. So all these things are going to evolve. With Facebook, it's free to pull that data under certain circumstances, but in other circumstances with other cloud data providers, it's not free. So I think that all of those is a reasonable checklist of things to consider when you're thinking through the cyber constraints of your software proposition. Other questions? Yes.
So certainly a lot of the unemployment kind of stagnation we have right now is caused by these efficiencies that you describe. But if you take this forward a couple iterations, you have a lot of people who don't need to be pulling plows anymore and who might teach themselves things on the iPad, and some of them will turn into geniuses and be inventing stuff. But a lot of other people will be kind of left over who don't have that capability. So the question is, what do we do with the rest of the humans?
I think the best way is to look back 100 years, right? If we go back to the 1850s or something like that, 70% of the American population was farmers. And today it's like 2% are farmers. So food is a basic utilitarian requirement. You don't have food, you don't eat, you don't live. So we have to provide that first. If I have to choose between food and watching a movie on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think I'd choose the food first, watch the movie second. They didn't have that choice in 1850 because they didn't have movies. But the inverse is they didn't have movies because they didn't have that choice. As soon as they didn't have to work 70% of the time on food, and they worked 2% of the time on food, they had 68% of their time free, and people started thinking of what to do with it. And the next thing they did with it was they invented moving pictures, right? And then they invented movie theaters, and they spent all their time building the movie theaters. And they spent their time hiring people to work in the movie theater. Then they spent their time teaching people to act, and they spent their time as agents and Hollywood whatevers. And so I think the same is true here, which is there's 100,000 teachers that teach geometry at the 9th grade level, and they all teach the same thing, the same way, every year for the past 100 years. Okay, so 100,000 times 100, right? 10 million man years of teaching the same geometry class. 10 million times. That's redundancy, 10 million to 1. If we can actually create one program that teaches geometry, maybe it takes more than a man year, maybe it takes 100 man years to create the one program. Maybe it takes 1,000. Create one program to teach geometry, put it on an iPad, give it away for free to everybody for the rest of all eternity, right? And this is the interesting thing about education, right? Education and textbooks, I believe textbooks will go to zero in cost because you're not going to be able to copyright them and because there is no proprietary benefit. Right? A geometry textbook is a geometry textbook. The rules of geometry were laid out by Euclid. They're 2,000 years old. No one's come up with a new way to define a line in 2,000 years. A line is a line, a circle is a circle. You know, Pythagorean theorem. Who was Pythagoras anyway? He's the guy that lived in America in the 19th century? No, right? 2,000 years old. It needed to be written once, and it could be reused by every generation for 2,000 years. The same is true with that geometry thing. If we create that geometry class, we give that away for free, 99,999 teachers probably just don't have a job, and they don't need a job. But you know what we need? We need a physics class, and then we need a quantum theory class, and then we need a class that teaches geometry in outer space. And then we need a class that teaches calculus. And then we need a class that teaches advanced calculus and calculus of variations. We need a lot of stuff. And so instead of having 100,000 people manufacture a mediocre product over and over and over again, why don't we have them all create a really, really good product, which we can mass produce and stamp out in volume? And so I think we'll see that. Some people see all that work to be done in that classroom. What I see is that cut the rope game. Well, we need like 1,000 to cut the ropes, right? There's no game or there's no program you can download to an iPad that lets you construct a 100-story skyscraper and see if it's going to collapse in an earthquake with a 5.8 on the Richter scale, right? We don't have that program yet. So maybe the more generic answer to your question is when 70% of the people were farmers and agriculturalists, right? They thought that was essential work. When it wasn't essential anymore, they became mechanics and industrialists. And then when that wasn't essential, they moved in the information age and they became people that created television and radio and newspapers and books and magazines and entertainment. Well, and now the next stage, maybe they become software engineers. If everything is software, how many people make their living designing algorithms to protect the network from hacking today, right? How many people make their living designing algorithms to give you bus tickets? Nobody, because it wasn't possible. But it is going to be possible, which means they will. So I think it's just like, it's inconceivable. You ever see a magazine stand? Well, maybe a magazine stand 10 years ago because they're starting to dwindle now. But you know how many different magazines there are in the world? Right? I mean, how many different magazine titles are there? Go back to 1500. How many people made their living in the magazine industry? Right? So if you'd said to someone in 1500, you know, I get this idea, you probably would have said to a monk, I have this idea, you don't actually have to hand copy the Bible anymore. You would say, well, what are we all going to do? Right? So, well, I mean, I think they say that the most famous library in Alexandria was the biggest one in the world, had like 5,000 books in it. You know, there was a time when, you know, the richest guy on earth, you know, the best library, if it had 10,000 books in it, then it was the best one on earth. And everybody spent their time just recopying, you know, 500 books over and over and over again. That's what they did by hand. And I kind of feel like the same way today. There's a lot of things where we just do it over and over and over again. But I can't see the virtue for the human race and the fact that there's a guy that's teaching, say, algebra the same way that it was taught 2,000 years ago by somebody else. And this is probably the 4 millionth person that did exactly the same thing. You know, and a basic principle of life is if you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, how are you ever going to get ahead? And we need to like build on top of building blocks, and we need to start to reuse things. And I think that's what will happen. I think we'll eliminate repetitive jobs and redundant and also common jobs, and we'll create more uniqueness, like the uniqueness of 25,000 different magazine covers every month. Unique graphic designers. That's not a job that really existed the same way. I think there's a lot of uniqueness to be created, and if we're going to actually create all this software, right, then we need a lot more software designers and logicians and engineers in order to make it all work. Probably need a lot of marketers to market it too. Any other questions? Yes?
Michael, I'd like your view on a problem that we are creating with everything that you've said so far, which is content overload. And I read in the BBC that it takes just 6 seconds that a viewer has to be fascinated by whatever content a company produces. On the other hand, marketers also have a problem to see people are not listening to messages from the company, but they are listening to messages that get passed around more frequently on social networks. So it seems almost that people should be thinking about not only a target audience, but who is influencing the target audience. But going back to the first part of the question, which is content overload, like 2 billion videos are viewed on YouTube. And everybody, if you take the Dunbar number, 150 friends are putting so much of content in your stream. There's a whole industry that's coming up, which is content curation. Where do you think this is going to go? How will people sort out what information that they need to see?
I mean, I think there's a balance between public networks and public knowledge and social or private knowledge. And I think there's a place for both. To a certain extent, I think there's going to be an explosion in applications that are intertwined with the social network, like social shopping, things where I want my friends' suggestions. I want to know where they are. I want to know what they value. I also think there are certain things where I just want a more objective source or a public source. I wouldn't necessarily go to my friends if I had a very technical question like, what is the gravitational field on Mars, right? I mean, it's not a vote. It's like there's a right answer, and I just want to find the right answer. And sometimes you want a broader statistical group, like everybody. Like when you're Googling things, Google's looking at the Google stream, which might be 4 million people that are actually typing, and they're not all my friends, but in fact, I'd probably rather have the statistical knowledge of 4 million people than the statistical knowledge of my friends. So it just depends on how personal it is. But in general, to your point, I think most things we do will be better done to the extent that they harness the power of the public cloud networks or the power of the private cloud networks. And I think it's up to the software designers or the business people or the politicians to figure out how to harness it, and in what context to harness it. And I think that mean there's a million projects, right? There's a million processes and a million projects for people to think through. Each one of them is in and of its own right. It's an interesting logical design challenge that would require that you fully appreciate and embrace all the technology tools at your disposal. Yeah, Carl.
Mike, so what you're saying when you are speaking about technology, what it means at the end of the day is you are asking CEOs more or less to look into a renaissance of technology, because if we think about 100 years ago, every company was kind of in technology, and today they are not. And what you are saying, you have to watch out for the technology and really understand what it can bring to you and what the challenges, but also the opportunities. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess I would say it's a good point, and it's fair to make that there's different ways to view this. We're in a massive remediation stage where similar to what happened between 1996 and 1999, when everybody thought, well, the internet's arriving, so I have to think through my internet banking strategy or internet this or internet that. The difference is today, this fifth wave is 10 times more powerful than the one that took place a decade ago. And the technologies that are at our disposal, mobile technology and the mobile networks and the social networks and the cloud networks, they're so much more powerful that it's much more likely that the business process or the political process will be affected by it. 10 years ago, nobody walked into a Walmart with a laptop computer and a scanner to price compare, to check prices in Walmart. Today, millions and millions of people walk into a Walmart and they've got a smartphone in their pocket. They can take it out and scan a barcode and immediately do comparison shopping. So this is a much more powerful phenomenon. In fact, you could think it's almost like software used to be solid state, and it was trapped on a computer, and it was at a desk, and we went to a computer to run it. And now software is vapor state. It's boiled off the computer. It's leaped outside of the cubicle, off the desk, off the computer, outside of the corporate walls or confines, outside of your personal office. It's leaped into the air. It's in our clothing. We're wearing it. It's in our pocket. It's all around us. We sleep with it. We travel with it. We go to dinner with it. So in a world where software is vaporous and it's everywhere and omnipresent, that means that technology is 100x more powerful. And I suppose my theme for CEOs, but it wouldn't just be CEOs, my theme for anybody would be consider the consequences of this new technology shift. I don't think that it's valid to suggest that you're either a technology-oriented CEO or you're not, or financial CEO or whatever. I think that when people talk about a company having a financial strategy versus a technical strategy, I think it's a little bit naive, because at the end of the day, right, the only companies that grow and last over time are technology companies. You know, once upon a time, you know, Nokia was a technology company, you know, but they were in the business of say lumber mills, you know. But lumber mills used to be a technical activity. We only start to think about things as not technical when they get so common that people take it for granted. Ironically, like, people don't think of the steel industry as technical in this country, and yet steel is probably the most technically challenging thing to produce imaginable and the most dangerous, and originally almost impossible to create. But at some point in time, people stop having a self-image of themselves as a technology company, and they think of themselves as just a producer, and they start to pursue financial strategies. And I think when that happens, they become vulnerable if there's a technology shift. It turns out that now the technology shifts are coming faster, and the oscillation is larger, and they resonate harder. And so it's more and more dangerous to not embrace technology today than ever. And I think that trend will only continue. I think technology will become a greater driving force in everything we do politically, socially, and economically. And so probably not just every corporation or government, but every enterprise or every nonprofit or NGO or group of any sort needs to consider how they can take advantage of technology, because to ignore it would render them inefficient compared to their peers or their competitors, and over time irrelevant. They'll be squeezed out of the market because the consumers are going to always prefer the best possible solution to the problem, and they'll make that decision. Yeah.
You've laid out for us really well, you know, the key players you think that'll affect this evolving ecosystem: Google, Apple, Facebook, et cetera. So where do you see MicroStrategy specifically fitting in? What role do you think you'll play in driving, you know, this new sort of shift 1, 3, and 5 years out? Where do you fit in that sort of evolving ecosystem?
Okay, well, it's a good question. our traditional roots are in the business intelligence industry, and so we've sold software to large enterprises that they ran within their enterprise in order to analyze data and make better decisions. But as the cloud and social and mobile waves have evolved, we've taken strides to reposition our own company so that just about a year and a half ago, we released a product, MicroStrategy Mobile, which projects all of the intelligence that we produce from our servers onto mobile devices like iPads and iPhones. And that MicroStrategy Mobile is about 10 times better than for information consumption than getting the information off of a sheet of paper or off of a web browser. So that was the first step, and that's been a fairly popular product line. We subsequently even evolved that so that you can actually do transactions on the mobile devices. So we as a company have evolved from a company of selling intelligence software to a company where we're actually providing mobile application platforms. Following that, we realized that we should make it easier to deploy this, so we created a product called MicroStrategy Cloud, and it's actually a worldwide network of data centers where you can build a MicroStrategy application and you can host it in our data center, and you'll have access to millions of dollars of our hardware. So that means that a customer wouldn't need to have millions of dollars of their own hardware or take a year or more to build the application and deploy it. So that took us into the services business where we now provide hosting services. We built on top of that with another product called Gateway, and Gateway is actually a product that runs in the cloud that will synchronize any enterprise database or enterprise application with Facebook. So if you had 50 million customers in your loyalty card program and you wanted to link them to the 50 million people on Facebook, the Gateway will link the two together. And so you would use Gateway to create something like a friendly mail application like I described, or a friendly credit card or friendly cash. Or if you wanted a friendly phone, right, if you plug Gateway into the Verizon network, then every single Verizon phone would know how to call all the friends of the owner. Right, so you would never forget your friend's name, you never lose your friend's phone number or your friend's email. It would be automatically downloaded into the phone using our Gateway product. We also realized that on top of the Gateway, we could create a set of consumer products. So we actually created a product called Alert, which is a friendly news reader and a friendly concierge product. So any brand can direct their message to their 20 million fans, and they can implement their own, in essence, intelligence network, news network, and commerce network over a mobile device, and that's called Alert. And that's free on the iStore. You can download Alert if you just go to the Apple Store and put it on your iPhone right now. We also created a product called Wisdom. And Wisdom is our MicroStrategy Mobile and MicroStrategy Intelligence software running against Facebook data that was extracted from the Facebook cloud using the Gateway product. So it's linked in that way. We're using all the building blocks of our own architecture. But Wisdom lets you analyze your own social network. So Wisdom tells you everything you want to know about your own friends. And if you have 3,000 friends, Wisdom tells you the best event of the day, where all your friends will be. It tells you the most important news. Like I just pulled it up today, and the most important news story was someone writing about the fact that her boyfriend just proposed to her last night. It was #1 news story. Out of 10,000 stories, it popped to the top. Another story is about posted by a Russian model, presumably about a Russian soccer team that died. So I'm presuming there was actually an airplane crash or something like that where they all died. I haven't read the news, but I'm seeing it on Facebook as it's popping into my list right now, just in the last hour. So Wisdom extracts that intelligence out of 10,000 pages of stuff that's coming at you every day and tries to show you the stuff that's really important to you. We created a corporate version of Wisdom called Wisdom for Brands. If you have 50 million customers, say you're McDonald's, Wisdom for Brands will extract all the demographic, psychographic insight for all 50 million of them out of the Facebook cloud, assuming that those 50 million people download your application and give you permission. And so that's an incredibly powerful customer analytic system. We also created a new product for consumers called Emma, which is a friendly marketplace. And it basically, it links all the best attributes of eBay with Facebook, with the mobile cloud, so that you can create listings that are tied to your Facebook identity, and you can then trade with your Facebook friends or define private marketplaces to trade within. Or you can implement social screening where you actually say you want to take a ride from here to New York City and share the ride with one other person. You can get their social profile and figure out who they are, who their friends are, and what they're like before you spend 4 hours in a car with them. Some transactions are arm's length. You don't care who the person is, but transactions like finding a roommate or sharing a ride or setting up a carpool or finding someone to take you out on a date, those things are all fairly social transactions. You care who the person is. So Emma allows you to, in essence, link all that information, the social network, into a trading network in real time. And that's also available for free online on the Apple Store. And so we're continually thinking about ways that we can link mobile software with social networks, or mobile networks with social networks with the cloud. And in general, I would say most of our investment efforts now are focused upon cloud-based mobile social technologies, which either have a direct benefit to a consumer or have a direct benefit to our corporate clients, or both. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So considering everything that you said, and considering the high relative unemployment that we have in the US, what specific advice would you give to a young college graduate who is looking for a job and who is finding it difficult to find a job?
I think you always want to look for a job in an industry which is growing. You know, you're better to be a good professional in an industry growing 100% than be a genius in an industry that's dying, right? You could be a genius working for Blockbuster Video or Borders bookstores, right? It's like being a genius on the Titanic, right? You can't swim against that. So first of all, I probably wouldn't be pursuing jobs in traditional bricks and mortar industries unless the company that you're going to work for is led by a visionary that's got a plan to do something with it. Because most of those industries they're very competitive and they're asset based. It's just like, how does a genius, would Steve Jobs or Bill Gates have risen out of the steel industry in 1980? Right? Would the industry have recognized that person? The answer is probably not. You want to be in an industry that rapidly redeploys capital and customer and revenue to the best people and the best ideas. So if you're creating social games and you come up with a good game or a good idea and you release it, you might get 50 million people to embrace it quickly. So I think you want to be in a business where you can exercise your creativity and where the industry naturally redeploys talent quickly. And that would imply, the best opportunities are either, well, actually, the best opportunities are all social network or software network opportunities, almost by definition, right? The single best idea in the year 2011 is a software network. Right, a software network to do what? A Netflix, a software network to deliver television and video, or Google, a software network to produce maps or to produce video or to produce answers or to distribute books or to distribute music, or distribute something. A software network to distribute news or magazines. If you're going to work for a company, work for a comic book, or if you're going to work for a comic book company, work for the one that's putting their comic book as software on the iPad, where the person's showing you all the cool features of the software comic book. Don't work for the company that's manufacturing, paper comics. I think in general, all the industries that rely upon manufacturing of steel or paper or cardboard or wood or anything like that, they're all going to be under pressure continually. There's going to be, for the next decade, continual downdraft in demand for all of those things that are consumables, with the exception that maybe if you manufacture buildings that people can live in or commercial properties and it's flexible, then of course as the economy grows, those things will grow. But you don't really want to be in the business of manufacturing crates, to haul books around, things like that. If you look at the U.S. mail has been deteriorating every year for the last 10 years. It will continue to deteriorate every year for the next 10 years. Everybody that produces anything that supplies the U.S. Postal Service will presumably also deteriorate at the same rate. So I would try to be on the side of either providing a working software network or providing the bandwidth, either providing the computational power or the bandwidth or the enabling tools to allow those software networks to flourish, or the devices allow them to flourish, because 50% or more of the economy is going to be revolutionized by that. All the growth is going to be there. You can see it right now, right? Google and Facebook collectively, those two companies are worth more than every newspaper and magazine and publishing company on the face of the earth, right? And neither of those companies existed 15 years ago. Yes, sir.
I'm in one of those industries that I hope survives this transition. I represent importers of beer, wine, and spirits.
You'll do fine. We're all the people that are losing money are going to be drinking their sorrows away.
One of the things that we struggle with is that our products don't get distributed to people who aren't 21. How fast do you see things like driver's licenses converting to facial recognition software that can be recognized at the point of distribution of either on-premises or off-premises?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. We're actually working on a product ourselves, which is a friendly ticketing application, so that you can actually distribute a driver's license or a passport or a ticket to a smartphone electronically. And we're going to release that, I think, within a month or so. It's called Usher, which I don't want to talk in detail a lot right now, but we definitely are big believers in electronic identity. I think within 36 months, I actually think you'll see it's routine that people actually are looking at identification via smartphone. It's logical this device is going to replace your not just your credit card, but your driver's license and your passport. The only impediment, of course, it won't be a technical impediment. It's going to be a regulatory, political impediment. The question will be at what rate do politicians embrace it. But I think within 90 days, if you keep tuned, you'll see that we've got technology in the market that's technically better and superior to all the current credentialing and authentication validation techniques we have in the world. And so we're at another one of those inflection points. We'll cross, and it'll be pretty obvious to everyone that every driver's license is obsolete and every passport is obsolete. And then it's just a matter of how long will it take for the powers that be to capitulate and roll over. There's just no reason why, there's no reason why we should be using, student IDs that are printed on laminated plastic and walking around with them in order to determine whether or not you're enrolled at Georgetown. It's just a horrible, horrible way to do it. You can lose it, you can counterfeit it, you can use a fake ID, you can use somebody else's ID. It's very difficult. This is a much better idea because with phones and multi-factor authentication, you could decrease those error rates and fraud rates by a factor of 100,000 or 1 million. But you can also implement new types of authentication that haven't ever been possible before. So I think there will be good news there. Things are going to get much better quickly.
So I want to thank everybody for coming today and for Michael's fascinating conversation. We hope to be back. Thank you very much.